Hello and welcome to the Evercade Retreat. Gene Joke here, and today I'm reviewing Sword of Sodan for the Sega Megadrive as featured on the Pico Collection 3 for the Evercade. The Sword of Sodan began life on the Amiga. It's a medieval fantasy hack and slash game where you choose between the barbarian warrior Brodan or his twin sister Shardan, who's also a barbarian warrior. Think Conan or Red Sonja and you get the picture. But anyway, you pick your warrior and you hack and slash your way across a fancy setting, defeating all manner of beasties to fight the evil wizard Zorus and become ruler of the kingdom. The plot is like something straight out of a Conan the Barbarian novel. It features huge sprites, atmospheric background noises, quite a lot of speech, and substantial amounts of gore. Coming out in 1988 for the Amiga with its one-button controller, it I suppose controlled as you'd expect for the system and was apparently quite well received and sold well. Well, I say it was well received. When it had a budget re-release in 1993, the critical reception was a lot more negative. Although, to be perfectly honest, that's nothing unusual. 5 years is a long time in gaming. But also, I'm not reviewing the Amiga version here, am I? The Mega Drive port of Sword of Sodan is quite notorious and is often regarded as one of the worst games for the system. But is it though? Released in 1990s, a whole 2 years after the Amiga original, the Mega Drive version did have some changes. Now, as I understand it, porting games from the Amiga to the Mega Drive was generally quite easy as they both used the same processor. So I'm not sure if the changes were for performance reasons or more to make it, to tailor it for the Mega Drive market and perhaps to extend the gameplay experience. The Amiga original was known as a short game. It had 11 stages and, interestingly, the Mega Drive version only has 8. Some parts were cut completely, others were merged into other levels, and many of the levels were extended and made more challenging. There were also fewer enemies to fight, although there are a lot more of them, and they'll come at you from both directions, whereas the Amiga original, they only come from the right, meaning you're always facing your opponents. The combat was slightly reworked, and there was more emphasis put onto the potions. I mentioned that the graphics were reworked, and generally they're not as of the same high standard as the Amiga original. Also, the sound isn't either. The digitised speech is largely gone, as are many of the background noises, and the things that have been replaced with are often quite irritating. Essentially, what began life as a technical showcase on the Amiga with some really well drawn and impressively sized graphics, atmospheric sounds, and digitised speech got downgraded into a clunky, ugly, poorly animated shit show. But if I stop there, it won't be much for a review. So let's go into some more detail. When the game boots up, you'll quickly find yourself with some very familiar fancy styling and presentation. The game does look the part. The text is on scrolls and so on and so forth. The stills of the characters look quite impressive. It sets the mood for a grand fantasy adventure. The action opens up with your warrior on a path with a field behind them with mountains in the distance. It doesn't look too bad, although anyone that has played the Amiga original will notice that the main sprite, although still large, isn't as large as it had been on the Amiga. Even so, when still, the game looks quite impressive. So it's easy to understand why many people might have seen the screenshots and thought, wow, this looks pretty cool, I'll give that a go. I was one such child. Well, I didn't give it a go, I could never find a copy, but I remember seeing it in magazines and thought it looked quite impressive. There is no music, just birds chirping in the background. For some reason they don't get scared off by the sounds of battle, or the battle that's about to begin. The battle with the controls. As I mentioned, when the game is still, it looks pretty good. But when you start moving, first things you notice are that the animation is very stiff and clunky looking, and it feels clunky when you're moving. Your sword attacks are, also quite poorly animated. There's no fluidity to the controls at all. Your character can jump, which feels just as unwieldy as the sword swinging. The sword swinging itself, you've got your attack button and you'll use that in conjunction with directions for different attacks, but there really isn't much variety in the moves and there's no combos or anything you can unleash. You pause the action to select potions that you might have picked up, unpause it and then press A to drink them. Also, as I mentioned, in the Amiga version, all your enemies come from the right hand side of the screen and they're facing you when you attack them. On the Mega Drive version, they come from both directions, so you have to use a direction and a button to turn around, which is not always that responsive. Getting surrounded by enemies and letting them get too close, that goes badly. The sword combat is very basic and pretty much just comes down to keeping the enemies at the furthest range of your attack range, and stabbing repeatedly. With the enemies on the first level or two, often the most effective technique is to crouch down and stab them in the dick. It pretty much becomes a castration simulator. Not far into the game you get to a section where there's spikes coming out of the ground, and of course you don't want to touch these because they'll spike you and drain your health, and while you're dealing with enemies that can be quite problematic. More annoyingly, the enemies are unaffected by these spikes, they'll just wander straight through them. Thanks games designers. Coming back to the potions, this is actually one of the more interesting parts of the game. The potions are colour coded: red, orange, blue and transparent. You can drink one at a time or multiple, and they have interesting combinations. The red potion will increase your attack strength, the orange potion will defeat the closest enemy to you, the blue potion will restore your health, and the transparent potion does nothing. Combining them, red and transparent will give you an extra life. Orange and transparent will give you a flaming sword, which looks cool and does more damage. The blue potion and the transparent potion will give you temporary invincibility, and I think red and orange also gives you the flaming brand. I think if you take 4 transparent potions, it will skip the stage. Other combinations will either do nothing or could end up poisoning you. Again, special thanks to the game designer there. But joking aside, making good use of the potions is absolutely essential for getting through the game, because it does get rather tough, and between the clunky controls and repetitive gameplay, you need all the help you can get. I can safely say that if I wasn't playing on the Evercade using save states, I wouldn't have finished the game. But let's go through the journey of the game. You start fighting on the path along by the fields and the mountains, fighting off the polearm wielding guards until you make your way to a castle or a fort. You make it through the doors because they conveniently left them open, and you fight your way across the drawbridge, or a wooden path with spikes coming out of the ground because, they've got to keep the attackers at bay. As I mentioned, these spikes do not affect the enemies, but they will cause you a lot of inconvenience and probably cause you to lose a life or two. These are but the first annoyance, or rather the second, other than the combat and the clunkiness. Next you'll find yourself getting into the city, where you'll be fighting more guards with polearms, some purple flying buzzy things which make annoying noises and can be a bit inconvenient. Some giant weird thing with strange claws will be there at the beginning, and then you'll progress and you'll fight more guards and some giants who you have to decapitate. Only overhead thrusts will get them, and when they're on the knees, a well-placed thrust will decapitate them. But if you don't do it in time, they'll get up and stomp you, and these guys will curb stomp you quite easily. And after that you'll be fighting through a graveyard, fighting lots of zombies. They're fairly easy to kill, however they will burst into flames and they'll explode and leave these fireballs which you'll have to jump to avoid taking damage, and you have to keep progressing towards the right. You could spend ages just hacking and slashing at zombies endlessly. Well, not endlessly, because where they explode and that will kill you before long. This level gets really tough and is quite frustrating. Well, that's not really a shock with this game. Next, you'll be going to the graveyard. Next, you're, inside a castle type thing, and you'll be fighting more of the purple fly things. They're not too bad, and there's more of the giants. Again, they're still quite annoying, and the method of killing them is still exactly the same. What makes things difficult here is the pit traps. You can't see where they are. You will fall to your death inside of them. You'll also be stomped into them by the giants. This level is a lot of fun. No, not a hint of sarcasm there. Next, you'll head deeper into the castle, fight masses of these purple flying things, fight a boss or two, and have to do some jumping over lava, and again this gets very challenging. But make it through this and you'll fight the final boss. That large weird looking thing you fought earlier on the second level, it's come back for a final confrontation, or rather you've gone to it, I suppose. Whatever. Anyway, you'll defeat it and then you'll fight Zorus the evil wizard for the final confrontation. Yep, if you've got this far you will have beaten the game. Well, if you beat him that is. And you'll be treated to a little cutscene telling you how you're going to rule the kingdom or whatever. Well done. I think the biggest well done will be enduring the game, especially if you've done it without abusing save states. The furthest I've managed to get into the game without using save states and not putting on easy or anything like that is to the pits, and pretty much every time I died in the pits because, it's just such a pain in the arse. So as you can tell, I'm pretty much slating this game. I think the biggest disappointment of something that's missing from the Amiga version, you no longer get to ride on a giant emu and live out your golden axe fantasies of riding a beast and killing enemies. So I've been ragging on this game quite a bit, and it is very flawed. Like I said, clunky controls, poor game design. It's actually not a very long game, but it's difficult for the wrong reasons. But for some strange reason, I kind of like it. I mean, sure, if I'd gotten it back in the day like I'd wanted to, I would have been very disappointed. But playing on the Evercade with save states, it has made it more enjoyable. Also being able to look things up and actually learn how to play it properly, well, I suppose it makes it not, I suppose it helps to some degree. Maybe it's just because I was a D&D nerd as a kid and was into this sort of thing and I still like a good bit of fantasy these days. Maybe that's it. But I don't hate this game, even though I fully recognise all of its flaws. So does it deserve its reputation as one of the worst games on the Sega Mega Drive? Well, it is pretty bad. It is up there, I suppose. But there are far, far worse games. But that's really saying how low the bar of quality can be in some cases. And many of those games were bootlegs or perhaps never made it outside of Japan, or they were bad and particularly obscure, more obscure than this. I mean, no one can forget how bad the Mega Drive port of Dark Castle is. Sword of Sodan is a bad game. It is flawed in many ways, but it's a kind of bad that still has a kind of charm. It's a kind of bad that you could tell they were setting out to try and make something interesting or exciting in some way. They just utterly failed. I won't try and convince you it's so bad it's good, but it is so bad that it's definitely an experience. And like I said, I kind of like it, but I couldn't recommend it to anyone unless I know they're the right kind of psychopath that could enjoy it. So really, all I could say about Sword of Sodan is, it's bad, but I kind of like it because I'm clearly some kind of sadomasochist and I like inflicting pain on myself. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little review and insight to the Sword of Sodan, and I may do some more videos like this about other games, good or bad. And anyway, I'll leave it there and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.